Imagine studying the mechanics of swimming for like 10 solid years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. You sit in classroom, you look at diagrams, you know the exact angle your hand should enter the water
Yeah.
to, maximize propulsion.
Right, the physics of it all.
Exactly. You've memorized the buoyancy, the water resistance.
Yeah.
You get an A+ on every single written exam.
But you've never been in a pool.
Exactly. And then somebody just pushes you into the deep end. What happens?
Fully drown.
You drown. Because despite a decade of academic study, you have never actually been wet.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy for what we're talking about today.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are unpacking a really fascinating guide called Breaking the Barrier to Fluent English Speaking.
It's a great read.
It really is. And the mission today for you listening is to figure out why millions of language learners are currently drowning in that metaphorical deep end.
Yeah, it's that incredible whiplash of studying a language for years, knowing all the vocabulary, and then just completely freezing the moment you try to order a cup of coffee.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it really is a phenomenal paradox, isn't it?
It totally is. Because you're transitioning from this passive, highly controlled environment of like studying a subject.
Right, with a textbook and a pen.
Yeah. And suddenly you're in an environment where you have to physically perform a real-time skill.
It's live action.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that the guide completely shifts the paradigm on why this happens. It forces us to stop treating language like the static textbook of facts.
Like stuff we can just stockpile in our brains.
Right, and start treating it as a dynamic, cognitive, and physical capability that requires, a totally different type of training.
So let's get right to the root of why that whiplash actually occurs. Because the text points directly to the foundation of how most of us were taught.
We're at the grammar trap.
Yeah. Reason 2 in the text is too much grammar focus. It highlights this massive obsession with rules over reality.
Oh, absolutely.
You know the drill. You sit in a classroom drilling the past tense. Then you move on to the present perfect.
And then you're agonizing over the future continuous, right?
Exactly. And the text argues that this over-focus on grammar actively inhibits your ability to speak.
It does. It really does.
But, okay, I have to push back a little bit on this right out of the gate.
Sure, go for it.
Are we saying grammar is entirely useless? Because, if you don't know how to construct a sentence, aren't you just stringing random words together?
Well, no, the guide isn't arguing that grammar doesn't exist or that it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's arguing against the timing and the cognitive weight we assign to it when we're trying to speak.
The cognitive weight, what do you mean by that?
Think of it through the lens of cognitive overload, when you're constantly monitoring your speech for rule violations.
Like, wait, is that an irregular verb?
Exactly. Checking to see if you conjugated it right before you even open your mouth.
Oh, man, yeah.
When you do that, you're hijacking the working memory your brain actually needs to communicate the idea. You completely disrupt the natural flow.
So it's just too much to think about all at once.
Right. The rules are the scaffolding of the building, but they are not the building itself.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. It actually reminds me of the difference between reading the source code of a video game and actually playing the game.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah, like you can study the code all day, right?
Yeah.
You can know the exact programming logic behind how Mario jumps.
Sure.
But knowing the code does not give you the thumb reflexes to actually time the jump over the Goomba.
Exactly. You only get those reflexes by picking up the controller and playing.
Right. Failing a few times, building that muscle memory.
Because knowing how a system works theoretically is just entirely distinct, neurologically speaking, from executing it under pressure.
Neurologically distinct.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, speech is a motor skill as much as it is a cognitive one. You literally have to physically train the muscles in your mouth.
In your vocal cords.
Right, and your brain's retrieval systems. They all have to work in sync. So when you prioritize grammar rules first, you're trying to be a programmer instead of a player.
That is so true. So just like the swimming analogy, the text insists you have to jump into the water and thrash around a bit.
You have to. It's the only way to build that specific reflex.
Okay, so if studying grammar rules is the equivalent of staring at source code, what are learners actually doing with all their study time?
Well, this brings us to reason 3 in the guide. Lack of speaking practice.
Right. The data here points to this massive imbalance.
The huge imbalance. People spend the vast majority of their time reading English, listening to English podcasts.
Watching videos with subtitles.
Yeah, watching Netflix. And they think they're putting in the work.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Because how often do we trick ourselves into that exact scenario?
All the time.
You sit down, turn on a movie, and you tell yourself, hey, I'm studying.
Right, but they're falling for the illusion of productivity. We deeply, deeply mistake input for output.
Input versus output. Break that down for us.
So, reading and listening are passive inputs. They feel productive because your brain is recognizing words, and recognition is a very low-energy cognitive task.
Because the word is already there in front of you.
Exactly. When you watch a documentary with subtitles, you feel like you're absorbing the language, but your brain is actually relying heavily on visual cues, the context.
As the safety net of the text.
Exactly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
speaking requires active recall.
And that's much harder.
It's a high-energy, demanding cognitive process. You have to generate the thought, retrieve the vocabulary from your long-term memory with zero external prompts.
No subtitles in real life.
None. Then you have to assemble it into a coherent structure and then physically articulate it.
So it's a completely different mental workout.
Totally different neural pathways. You're not just listening to someone else do the work.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's look at natural language acquisition. Think about a baby, right? A baby listens for an entire year before it even attempts to form a coherent word.
That's true.
So isn't passive input the required first step? Don't you have to, fill the tank before you can drive the car? How do we know when it's time to stop absorbing and start talking?
That's a really common pushback. And yes, input provides the raw materials, but here's the thing. Adults are not infants.
Okay, fair.
An infant is building their entire conceptual understanding of the universe from scratch. Their brain is in the state of hyperplasticity.
Right, they don't even know what a cup is yet.
Exactly. But as an adult, you already have a fully formed conceptual map of the world. You know what a cup is. You know abstract concepts like justice or tomorrow.
So the foundation is already there.
Right. What you lack is simply the mechanical habit of producing the new sounds and structures associated with those concepts. So if you wait until you feel ready, or until you feel you've absorbed enough input to speak flawlessly,
You're just going to be waiting forever.
you'll simply never speak. Active speaking is where the actual skill acquisition happens, because it forces the brain to forge those new retrieval pathways.
Okay, so let's talk about the friction of forging those pathways.
Yeah.
Because when a learner finally takes that leap,
Right.
they pause the movie, they close the book, and they're like, okay, I'm going to open my mouth and speak.
Yeah.
They immediately slam into a massive mental hurdle.
A huge wall.
The text calls this reason 4, thinking in your native language.
The translation bottleneck.
The translation bottleneck, yeah.
From a cognitive science perspective, this is the single most exhausting part of trying to speak a new language, and it's the primary reason people just freeze.
The source explains it like this. Learners will think of a concept in their native language first, and then attempt to translate it into English before speaking.
Right.
So I came up with an analogy for this. Imagine your thought process is a car on a highway.
Okay, I like this.
You want to get from point A, which is the idea, to point B, delivering the English sentence. Fluent speakers just drive straight down the highway. Zoom, right to the point. Right. But a learner forces themselves to take this complex, winding, unpaved detour off the highway.
Oh, yeah.
They drive through the dense city center of their native language, stopping at every single traffic light to check a dictionary, before eventually merging back onto the highway to deliver the sentence.
The cognitive load of that detour is just staggering.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. Let's break down what the brain is actually attempting to do in, milliseconds.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so you have an abstract idea. You immediately formulate that idea into words in your native tongue.
Right.
Now, your brain has to act as a live, real-time dictionary, swapping out the vocabulary word by word.
Which is already a lot of work.
Then it has to act as a live syntax checker, rearranging the sentence structure. Because, English word order is likely very different from your native language.
So it's running all these background apps at the same time.
Exactly. And only after running all those background applications do you finally send the signal to your vocal cords.
Wow.
The text correctly points out that this multi-step process severely slows down speech, literally to the point of a dead halt.
It's totally exhausting. You'd burn out after 2 sentences.
Yeah, you see people physically sweating sometimes.
But the guide states that fluent speakers think directly in English. So how does a learner physically force their brain to abandon the deep, comfortable neural grooves of their native language?
That's tough.
Feels like an impossible ask, right? When your native language is practically hardwired into your identity, how do you trust a totally new pathway?
It definitely feels daunting, but you have to remember the brain is incredibly plastic.
Right.
The text acknowledges the difficulty, but it gives a mechanism for change. You have to intentionally bypass the detour.
Oh.
You start associating concepts directly with the English words, completely cutting out the native language middleman.
Give me an example.
Okay, so when you look at an apple, your brain currently fires the word, say, manzana.
Right. In Spanish.
And then you translate that to apple.
Yeah.
You have to train your brain to look at the physical object, the red fruit, and immediately fire the word apple.
So no Spanish translation at all.
Right. You do this by labeling your environment, visualizing actions directly in English, and just strictly refusing to allow the translation process to even begin.
But bypassing that detour creates a totally new problem.
Oh, absolutely.
When you drop your native language, you're dropping your safety net. You're flying without a harness.
Yeah.
Which means you are guaranteed to fall.
Yeah.
You are going to say things incorrectly.
You will make mistakes. It's inevitable.
And that brings us to the emotional core of this entire issue. Reason 5 in the guide. Lack of confidence.
Right.
Because even if you understand the cognitive mechanics, and even if you try to stop translating in your head, there is a massive psychological wall standing in your way.
All those previous roadblocks we talked about, the grammar obsession, the lack of practice, the translation detour, they all compound into this final emotional barrier.
It's heavy.
And the text notes a really tragic irony here.
What's that?
There are countless people who actually know English exceptionally well. Their vocabulary is vast. Their reading comprehension is top tier.
But they won't speak.
Right. They completely lack the confidence to speak.
Because the fear of looking stupid is a universal human paralyzer. Nobody wants to sound foolish.
Nobody.
But the guide spells out a golden rule to combat this, and I love this. It's a complete paradigm shift. It says, fluency is not about perfect grammar. Fluency is about communication.
Yes. If people understand you, you're already succeeding.
That requires changing your whole internal definition of success, doesn't it? From flawless execution to just effective connection.
Exactly. It's a huge mental shift.
But I have to challenge this, though.
Bring it on.
It sounds like a lovely, comforting sentiment for like a low-stakes conversation in a coffee shop.
Sure.
But what about the listeners who operate in high-stakes professional environments?
That's a fair point.
If you are in a crucial boardroom meeting, pitching a massive project to international clients, and you completely mangle your verb tenses or use the wrong preposition, doesn't that cost you credibility?
It's terrifying, yeah.
How do you balance this supposed need for effective connection with the very real fear of looking unprofessional in front of your peers?
The fear is entirely valid, especially in a professional setting where competence is constantly being judged.
Right.
But let's look at the opportunity cost of the alternative.
Okay.
Let's say you're sitting in that boardroom, gripping your notes. You have a brilliant strategic insight that could solve the client's problem.
You know exactly how to fix it.
Yes. But you choose not to speak because you aren't 100% sure if you should use the present perfect or the past simple tense.
Oh, wow.
What is the result?
Silence.
Silence. You contribute absolutely nothing. Your brilliant idea remains entirely unheard.
That's a punch to the gut.
Right. Stopping to wait for perfect English guarantees failure because you voluntarily eliminate yourself from the game.
You take yourself off the board.
Exactly. The source is arguing that learning and communicating are about progress and value. An imperfectly delivered brilliant idea is infinitely more valuable to a company or a relationship than a perfectly structured sentence that you were too paralyzed to say out loud.
An imperfectly delivered brilliant idea that completely reframes the anxiety.
It really does.
Because if the clients understand the massive value you're bringing to their bottom line, they do not care if you dropped an article or misused a plural.
They don't. They really don't.
You're succeeding at the actual goal, which is moving the project forward.
Because the goal is always connection and transfer of value. The text reinforces this heavily in its conclusion. Every single time you open your mouth to speak, regardless of the errors, you improve the neural pathway.
So we have successfully diagnosed the pathology here. We understand the grammar trap, the input illusion, the translation bottleneck, and the perfectionism paralysis.
We've covered the roadblocks.
But the source material doesn't just leave us with a diagnosis. It provides a very clear, highly actionable prescription.
Yes, the how to improve section.
Exactly. And we need to unpack how these specific steps actually hack the cognitive roadblocks we just talked about.
They're great because they might sound simple on the surface, but they are neurologically targeted interventions.
Let's run through the primary ones. The text advises practicing speaking every single day.
Consistency is key.
It suggests speaking in front of a mirror. It highly recommends recording your own voice. And it tells you to watch English content, but specifically to pause and repeat the sentences out loud.
Let's look at recording your voice first, because this directly attacks the lack of output problem.
How so?
Well, you cannot record yourself silently reading a textbook. Pressing the record button forces the physical mechanism of speech.
It forces active recall.
Right. Furthermore, listening back to it, as agonizing as it might be, provides objective feedback.
Because it always sounds different in your head.
Exactly. You stop judging your English based on how it feels in your head, and you start analyzing it based on how it actually sounds.
It rips off the Band-Aid.
Totally.
And what about the advice to watch content and repeat the sentences out loud? I see people doing this, often called shadowing.
Shadowing is a brilliant hack.
How does that help with the deeper issues of cognitive overload?
So, shadowing is a way to bypass the translation detour. When you listen to a native speaker say a sentence on a show, and you immediately repeat it verbatim.
You're not thinking it up in your native language first.
Exactly. You aren't generating the thought in your native language. You are taking a fully formed, grammatically correct English structure and passing it directly through your own vocal cords.
So you're skipping the detour entirely.
Yes. It trains the articulatory loop in your brain. You are practicing the physical rhythm, the intonation, and the muscle memory of the language.
Without the exhausting cognitive load of building the sentence from scratch.
Exactly. It chips away at that habit of internal translation.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
You are basically borrowing their neural pathway for a few seconds to train your own muscles.
That's a great way to put it.
But then the text suggests speaking in front of a mirror. I have to be honest, that sounds like pure torture for anyone who is already lacking confidence.
It does sound awful, doesn't it?
Why deliberately make yourself uncomfortable?
Because it's a form of exposure therapy.
Yeah.
It confronts perfectionism paralysis head on.
Okay, walk me through that.
When you speak to yourself in a mirror, you are forcing yourself to watch yourself struggle.
Oh, man.
You watch yourself search for words, you watch your mouth make unfamiliar shapes.
It sounds so awkward.
It is, but it normalizes the imperfection. It teaches your nervous system that stumbling over a word is not a catastrophic event.
Right. The world doesn't end.
Exactly. You build the exact emotional resilience you need in a safe environment, so that when you finally step into a room with native speakers, your fight or flight response doesn't completely shut down your working memory.
So, for you listening, which of these interventions feels most daunting right now?
Good question.
Is it staring yourself down in the mirror? Is it hitting the red record button on your phone and having to listen to your own voice stumble through a paragraph?
I bet for a lot of people it's the recording.
Yeah, probably. Because whichever one triggers the most resistance in your gut is almost certainly the exact mechanism you need to break your specific plateau.
It all comes back to forcing yourself into the water. Every single one of those actionable steps is just a different methodology for getting wet.
Yeah. So as we synthesize everything we've pulled from this guide today, the path forward is starkly clear.
Very clear.
If you've been studying a language for years, your academic bookshelf is already full. You need to step away from the diagrams of the swimming pool.
Time to jump in.
Shift your time from passive consumption to active, uncomfortable speaking. Force your brain to abandon the translation detour by labeling your world directly in English, and fundamentally redefine what a successful interaction looks like.
Success is being understood.
Period.
The text actually concludes with a really powerful, almost commanding thought. It says, "Stop waiting for perfect English. Start speaking today, because the only way to become fluent in English is to speak English."
It is the ultimate truth of any physical skill. You cannot read your way to fluency.
No, you really can't.
But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, building off the psychology we've unpacked here.
Okay.
We talked a lot about the tragedy of holding back a brilliant idea in a boardroom just because you were afraid of making a minor grammatical mistake.
Right, the perfectionism paralysis.
Exactly. If fluency in a language is primarily about effective connection rather than achieving flawless execution, how might the fear of making mistakes be holding you back in other areas of your life?
Oh, that's deep.
Where else are you sitting in a metaphorical boardroom, holding on to immense value, waiting for absolute perfection before you even allow yourself to speak up? Something to think about. Until next time.